who's engineer Jayesh Vida. He's a principal and founder of firm Enviro Consultancy LLP. He's an energy analyst and green building professional with 16 years of total experience, an ECBC master trainer and professional consultant, BEE energy manager and auditor, Edge auditor, Griha trainer and evaluator, lead AP at UBC AP. He is highly experienced in whole building design simulation projects and has experience of more than 200 plus projects across India and different roles and capacities, including lead, IGBC, Griha, etc. He has worked in Godrej as North India head for 10 years, handling the green building operations. He is one of the official trainers for IGBC and Griha and has conducted more than 25 training programs since last 5 years. This, I again welcome you all and uh, wish the best for all of us. Maybe please start with the session now.
Yes, so I'll start. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to start with the basics of building envelope. I'm not going here, not trying to tell what has to be done and what not has to be done as far as ECBC code is concerned. So today's lecture only would be based on pure design aspects and what all things can be done in the envelope itself, so that we are probably starting the race ahead towards the compliance, and maybe we may not need to do a lot many things apart from the mandatory, of course, in other sections. So how best we can do the envelope part, that's what something that we will be seeing. So I'm basically an engineer, but still I'm going to talk about architecture. So maybe at the end of this session, you all can tell me where things have been wrong. To start with the session, I'll start with some beautiful images of our ancient structures. This is the famous Hawa Mahal of Rajasthan. Some similar koti maybe in Rajasthan or any other part of India as well. This can be anyone's ancestor house, something probably which we would have seen or maybe we would have stayed as well. Old Jain mandirs. So what's best or why I'm showing you all these structures? The era in which these structures were built, there was no proper engineering or design tools available, but the design concepts or the way those things have been built up is definitely a learning experience for all of us even today. So what's best in this? You have a beautiful daylight. You don't need artificial life. In fact, in temples, you don't have artificial lights as well. You have good ventilation, and also the structure remains relatively cooler as compared to the outside environment or ambient environment, even in peak summers. So why we did start talking about this? Uh, we did start about good structures because the rosy lives end over there. Now, right now, the situation and the scenario is very different, and uh, yeah, it's very different, and it's something a total haphazard manner. The construction is not at all planned. You will see buildings at every inch which is available, area where a person can build on. Encroachments are there here and there. You can see in this picture also there are so many wires and cables. I guess only the local electrician will know which cable goes to which shop. So that's how the situation is. Why are we talking about all these things? I mean, may not be related directly to what we are going to study, but that forms a basis as to why we are going through these codes. The main reason for this unplanned development is the lack of implementation of codes. It's not that we don't have codes. We definitely had codes. Even ECBC was there in 2007, but the implementation of ECBC was not very much mandatory. But right now, that's the more emphasis, and that's the more reason that we need these codes to be implemented as well. The other parts that we are going to see in this is, of course, Pallavi has already explained in brief as to the main concerns over here is the energy. Every building consumes about uses 40% of the energy that is generated, and in turns it emits out lots of CO2 emissions. So now where this energy is consumed, typical. If I say a typical office building, this would be a pie chart, more or less 5% here and there, but more or less most of the energy consumption would be there in air conditioning. Due to climate change, of course, we can't probably live without air conditioning a bit. Now, the main consumption is air conditioning, and the main areas where we can save is also air conditioning. Of course, apart from the lighting, which is the second most energy consumption. Now, we need to first understand what contributes to this air conditioning and how best we can reduce it. So if I have to break up this air conditioning load or the heat gain, it would be more towards the envelope part, wherein more than 50% is in glazing. The second component would be roof walls, and 25% is of course the humans and the equipments that are there in the building itself. So you can see very well that more than about 70-75% of the heat gain is due to envelope itself. So that's where we have to target, and we have to see where what measures can we take to first reduce this requirement of air conditioning, so that the consumption also reduces automatically. Now, who all can contribute towards this energy efficiency? So most of the times when we think about it, it's basically we think that energy is a baby of MEP consultant, but not entirely, of course. MEP consultant or the designer is a part of it. So everyone, whoever so I have mentioned in this, owner, of course, he has to take decisions and he has to shell out money. Architect, he is the first initiator of any building, so he would be the main person who will design the building how it has to be, and that would form a basis whether the building is going to be energy efficient or may not be. A landscape architect, maybe, may not be, but no, it would be definitely, because how my microclimate is designed with respect to the building is of very much importance. So that will reduce my temperature, ambient temperature, and turn the heat that is going to come in. Facility management group, of course, because he's the person who is going to manage the building and he knows how the building operates. So his perspective can help us a lot in terms of designing the building, also as well as in terms of designing the other equipments or air conditioning systems as well. So by and large, everyone has to contribute and contribute in a very positive manner so that my whole building is very efficient. Now, what approach do we go on for this thing? The three basic ideas that I have jotted down in this slide is about the form of the building, orientation and shading, building materials for the envelope. Now, the first two are very much limited and maybe project specific, site specific, because most of the times you may not have the liberty to design the buildings as you want. I mean, in terms of shape and size, in terms of shape and facade, or maybe orientation, because the site that you have, probably the building can be designed in only one particular manner. So that might be the case, but definitely the third, building materials are is always something that we can select in a much better way. Now, to start with foam, I'll not start with any basics or maybe with any theory part, but I'll directly take a case study which we have done for a building in Bangalore. So I'm taking a very temperate climate, maybe one of the best climate in India. So the impact that it can make in this climate, you can just magnify it to the hot and dry as well as warm and humid climatic conditions. So what here I'm trying to show you is the impact of some scientific studies that we can do while designing the foam. So here I'm keeping the total built-up area of the building as it is, and I'm just selecting four different types of shapes of the building that maybe which are quite common and which can be considered. First is a squarish type of building, not a very elongated rectangle. The second is an elongated rectangle design. The figures or the images you see down below are the images that from a daylight software to understand how much amount of daylight it can be penetrated through. And of course, with that, we have also designed, or we have also analyzed what would be the heat part as well. So the third form is slightly curvy linear. I'm not making a typical blunt edges, but I'm just giving them a curves to make, to also have a good artistic look. The fourth form is similar to the second rectangular building, with the only modification that the two lateral parts have been slightly shifted down to 45 degrees downwards, so it giving a different shape and form. For all these four forms of the building, the built-up area is constant. So what are the analysis? The analysis basically with the form first rectangular type of building, but it has a greater depth. The second has a shorter depth, so that the daylight penetration is much more as compared to the form one. The third is a curvilinear. With the curves, you have more surface area, so whatever the heat that is, or the sun rays that are incident on the building, you have a larger surface area, so the time taken for heat to come inside the building is much more, because you have more surface area, more the time taken to get it heat up, the surface will get heated up first, and then the heat will move inside the building. The fourth form has an advantage of the shape, and it gives you a self shading. So lesser amount of heat definitely will come through as compared to form one and second. Now, also we had a space to make atrium or a skylight part to induce more daylight in Form 3, whereas that benefits were not there in Form 1, 2, or 4, because you can see that the areas are very small, and if I add up the skylight or some daylight part, the carpet area would get reduced. So the daylight penetration is much more in Form 3, and that's why it's the most preferable part, because you have good daylight, as well as the heat ingress is also lesser as compared to all other forms. So this is some form of studies that we can do before starting the construction, and analyze as to how the buildings would behave. Second part is the orientation. So which is the best orientation? By thumb rules, if we go, of course, the north-south is the best orientation, with more facades on these two, or the openings on these two facades. But if I analyze the Sunpat diagram, you probably by design or by experiences also, you would know that as you go probably down towards the south, maybe apart from Bangalore, and if you just tend to move towards more south, the north facade is also very much critical, because more than 4 months you'll have good sun over there, so your treatment also would be different as compared to if you design a building maybe in Delhi. So it's very important which location you are in, and just not designed by the thumb rule. So of course, as I said in the initial part, that most of the times you don't have the liberty to orient your building as you want it. But yeah, I mean, wherever possible, maybe if you have a good site area, and if you can orient the building in a best possible way, you can definitely do it. If not the best possible orientation, you can then design your interiors in such a way that maybe your buffer zones or the core areas are towards west or south, of course permitted by Vastu and other rules and the principles. I'm just taking another case study courtesy. This is an IGBC headquarters in Hyderabad. So, how orientation has played a role in this particular building, because this is the first green building that was designed in India, and the highest rating that was awarded at that point of time outside US was this. So all before actually constructing the building, so all measures and different analysis were done So one of the analysis that was done was pertaining to orientation. They did had a liberty because the site area was quite huge and the building footprint was very small. So this is the existing orientation, which is at about 180 north, if we I would say, and whatever the energy consumption that you can see is about 72,750 annually. The amount of energy that is consumed. This is a smaller building, less than 20,000 square feet building. If I just rotate these buildings by 90 degree and by 180 degree, the consumption is varying because of course the window areas and the location has changed. And again, if I rotate it by let's say 270 degrees, the orientation has changed and the consumption. So if I analyze with all these four rotations, you can see that the current building is of course the best oriented building with the least energy consumption. And if I just rotate it by 90 degree, the consumption is the maximum. So if I compare with the minimum and maximum, almost quarter to two or 2% of energy is saved for this small size of a building, and when the window to wall ratio is only 17%. So if I just magnify it, of course, the savings may not get magnified, but even a couple of percent savings for let's say about a lakh or a 2 lakh square feet building, it's quite huge. That too without any investment that you would be doing it. So definitely this is something that we can take care of. Now moving on to the materials or the envelope. I'll also take the shading part along with this material part only in the glass, because when you don't have the flexibility of orientation, the shading is another important aspect which you can design and try to reduce the consumption. So as we saw in the first pie chart, that the glass is a significant contributor of energy and significant contributor to heat gain. So of course, we cannot have a building without any glass. It would be a bunker, and definitely it would be a very dull place to stay. So you do need glass, but then you have to have a correct balance of glass where the daylight, whatever is going to come, is sufficient enough, and you are also restricting a lot amount of heat as well. Why glass is very important or significant? Because it exhibits all the three forms of energy propagation. So the things that we already studied in school, the forms of energy transfer, heat transfer, I would say, conduction, convection, radiation. So all these three forms are shown by glass. That's the reason it is very critical to understand and design as well. The first is conduction. How would the conduction take place? So
Then the same thing we will just
uh, does
Sorry,
anyone
sir.
want to?
No, it was by mistake.
Okay, okay. So, as I was saying, the conduction, the heat transfer due to conduction is basically through a material.
okay.
So, any material will get heated up, and that heat it will propagate towards the inside. So, whenever my
Then just take to the
So when the heat is incident on the glass surface will get heat up, and the material will transfer the heat inside the space. Now, what is convection? Convection requires some form of medium to travel, which is air. So whatever the air currents which are there near the window, they will get heated up with respect to conduction and radiation, and that air which flows inside the building will transfer the heat as well inside the building. Now, the most important form of heat transfer, which is radiation, is there in this glass. So, if you just stand near the window, you will be feeling the heat. So that's how the heat is directly transmitted through the glass inside our space. So that's how all the three modes of transfer, heat transfer, are shown. Now, the properties of glass, apart from all opaque assemblies like wall and roof, glass do has a U value. So U value is nothing but the heat transfer through conduction. So it requires a material and heat transfer due to the different temperatures at the two ends of these materials. So the lesser the capability of the material or the glass to transfer the heat is better. So definitely here the thickness plays a quite important role. Most of the glasses that you have in the residential building is 5 or 6 glass, wherein the U values will typically be in the range of 5.6, 5.7 watts per square meter Kelvin. Now, if you see a commercial building, you will also be seeing a double frame glasses, or something what we say as DGU, double glazed units. So there is a 2 6 glass with a sandwich air gap of about 12 It might be an argon gas also, or sorry, an inert gas, or might be an air or a vacuum fill. So these glasses have much better property in terms of U values, and they reduce the heat that is going to be coming inside the building because of the air gap inside, which traps the heat. So here typically the U value would have the range of about 1.7, 1.8, or max to max 3 watts per square meter Kelvin. So in short, it's basically the U value is due to the heat transfer due to the material. Now coming to the second property, which is more important as far as a tropical country like ours is concerned, it's basically called as a shading coefficient, or you can also term it as solar heat gain coefficient, or even some people will call it as a solar factor. So what exactly this is? This is basically a ratio of the amount of heat that will come inside the building to the amount of heat that is incident on the glass. So basically the amount of heat, if 100 is the amount of heat that is incident on a surface, and if I am able to let 60% of it, so my ratio 0.6, so the property of the glass or the shading coefficient will be 0.6. Now, how this is calculated? So the basic minimum glass that is available to or known to humans is about 3 glass, which can be manufactured. So what we assume is through that 3 clear glass, everything will come in. There is no obstruction or no restriction. So whatever heat is there on this incident on this glass, all 100% will pass. So now with respect to that basic minimum glass, how better our glass is behaving, how much lesser amount of heat that our glass is letting in is the property which is called as a solar heat gain coefficient. So if, as I given an example, that if 60% of the heat is propagating inside, so only the ratio would be 0.6. And if I have to compare to the two types of glasses, the single glaze glass will limit or will allow the heat to about 50% or maybe about 60%. And if I have to have a high performance or let's say a coated glass, solar E glasses, so it would be about 20 to 25%. So there are different types of glasses available in the market. Also, you will come across the terminology saying that it's a high performance glass or a low E glass or a solar control glasses. So all these terminologies indicate there is some coating on the outer surface of the glass, which you can see probably in this particular drawing. It might be coated, or it might be a tinted coat, or it might be a clear coat as well, which will restrict or reduce the amount of heat that is coming inside the building. The third property, which is important with respect to the light, is visual light transmission. So it's basically the amount, for the first two properties, the U value and the solar factor, we were talking about the heat component. But for this particular property of glass, what we will be seeing is the light component of the sun. So whatever the amount of light that is incident on the glass, how much amount we get inside is the property that is light transmission. So this is also in terms of ratio only, and the value will be ranging from 0 to 1. So ideal glass, I would say, which can have a light transmission in excess of 30% is good enough for us to consider. Now, if I compare the glasses, you would see that the single glaze 6 glass is the basic minimum glass, which would not meet the code, of course. But as I go down with the performance glasses and the tinted glasses, I can see that there are some glasses which will definitely meet the code in terms of prescriptive requirements. So you 0.27 solar factor or SHGC is the requirement that the glass should be having it if we go with the prescriptive requirement. So that can be met easily by few of the glasses available. Uh, Before going to the shading part, I'll just show the sample data sheet. This is the data sheet that I have taken from Asahi. So you will see all these thermal properties are seen. The U values are there on the extreme right hand side. So these are all single glaze glasses or 6 glasses. You have the solar factors mentioned over here as well as the VLT or the light transmission values mentioned. So the type of the glass or the tint or the shade of the glass that you want, clear, blue, greens, metallics, or whatever you feel to. So you can pick and choose from these, and as well as that can meet the codes. So you can select those types of glasses. Now coming to the shading part, there are different types of shades that you can definitely do: horizontal, vertical. You can do these louvers also. You can have tilted or angled chhajas and fins as well, and you can have multiple fins. So there are many types of the shading patterns that you can do to make the facade quite beautiful, as well as it would help to reduce the heat gain also. Also, how window to wall ratio also impacts to the overall study is something which is very critical. And these all values, whatever we are discussing right now about WWR or shading or VLT and SHGC, these are all governed or provide the ideal values are provided in the codes as well, which we'll be seeing tomorrow. So this is another building in Mumbai that we had done an analysis. So it is a warm and humid climate, and going by the thumb rules, the north is not that much affected. So here we are having a full glaze glass, and the top portion is of course the plenum area, and which is insulated, but you have a high amount of clear window, which can be, I mean, visible glazing. So here for the north facade, we have only done with the small overhang, as well as a very thin, about 450 vertical film. But for other facades or for other orientation, we did some permutation combination. What we did for east, west, and southwest was that we included a small light shelf over here. Now, the purpose to include the light shelf over here is to reduce some of the heat or some of the direct radiations inside the building, as well as if I have a polished surface over here, so I'll be also able to have more light penetration and the daylight area will increase. So that's what we did over here in addition to the treatment that was already done for the north facade. Now, for particularly the south facade, we introduced patterns of fins over here. This particular had a longer and a clear vision area, but we also had included small fins. Now, the size of these fins were not very large. It was only 450, so that the cleaning of the windows can also take place, and these aluminum fins would not obstruct the cleaning part as well. So uh, the width of these horizontal fins were very small. Now, with all these permutation and combinations, how did my building behave? So first I will show you how the building shape is. So this is the type of the building with a central core. There is no atrium in this, but this is only the central core with the passages over here, and these areas that you see are the office areas. Now, what we did was we did an analysis with the higher window to wall ratio, which was the original design. About 70% of the clear vision glazing was there, and the rest area was a spandrel or the curtain glazing. So as then we analyzed it with terms of energy. What we saw was with this respect to base case, which is ECBC. If I compare there, my design is bad. Only in terms of architectural design, I'm incurring 7% higher energy consumption with 71% WWR and SHGC of about 0.4. Then I reduced the SHGC. I took 3 different types of glasses, and with solar factor or SHGC of zero point 0.2, I was able to be just below my base case or an ECBC. So with all these shading as well, I was able to come here. Now this 107 was without any shading as well. So as I go on doing this shading part, I was able to go on reducing my energy consumption, and with this combination, I was able to meet the baseline. Now let's say I reduced my window to wall ratio to 50%. I'm still quite high with respect to conventional design, but then I reduced it to 50%. So just by reducing the window area, my energy consumption of the building reduced by 3%. Now again, following the same exercise with the shading elements and with the glass, my energy consumption went down, and I was also able to meet the requirement as over here, and I did not need it to go as low as zero point 0.2 SHGC. One thing is you can also analyze with respect to different manufactured data sheets is if you go on reducing the solar factors, your VLT or the light will also get reduced. So the amount of daylight that will come inside the building will be much lesser. So that itself will also be a problem. So that's the reason what we want is not a very dark glass, so that the light inside the building or the artificial lights inside the building are always on. So that is also one thing that we need to ensure. Now, what was the impact with respect to the daylight inside this building? So, with 50% window to wall ratio and without any shading, I was able to have an average lux levels of 518, and you can see all the peripheries were having high amount of glare. So definitely, most of people would keep the windows. I mean, the blinds down, and the windows would be of no use except for the outside world to have a look at the architecture. Now, I introduced the shading as I had already shown you. So here my average lux level reduced with respect to the shading from 518, I came down to 380, which is quite good enough still. Of course, at the perimeter, at the deep inside the building, you are not going to get daylight in any which ways, but at least the glare part reduced quite significantly with that shading device. And yet, I was able to take a glass which is not very dark, and not by the glass selection, but by shading, I am able to reduce the heat as well as the glare inside the building. But still, 380 lux levels is quite good enough as compared to NBC norms also, which says that a normal office building should have about 300 lux levels. So I was having a win-win situation wherein everything is met quite properly. So this was all about the glass and the main important part. So now moving on to the opaque construction. So the basic opaque construction of about wall and roof is the concrete mass walls or mass roof. So here it would be a pure solid concrete walls which would be having your very high value of U, very high U values will be there, and Due to that, quite significant amount of heat will come through through these structures. So most of the times in many of the buildings, you see the walls are having a higher exposed area. So that's the reason these becomes very critical in high storied buildings or a very tall buildings. So let's say if I have a insulation and I want to treat one of these two opaque elements, so which would I treat? So I would definitely see what is the exposed area. So if my roof is having a very flat roof and the building is not a multi-story building, something like an institution building, I would definitely put insulation in the roof and would try to reduce the heat gain through the roof itself. But if there is a multi-story building and if I have a liberty to put insulation, I would try to put an insulation in the wall to make that assembly a very efficient wall assembly, and which would reduce the heat ingress inside the building. Now, seeing the different types of wall assembly that we would have probably designed or we would be designing as well. So, brick wall, maybe with insulation, without insulation, cavity walls with insulation, concrete blocks, hollow concrete blocks, flash blocks, AAC blocks, which are mostly nowadays used and which are a part of the DSR or SSR of many PWD institutions and other state bodies as well. So these are few of the different types of wall assemblies that we would generally have witnessed and we would have seen. Yeah, I would take one particular type of wall assembly, which is AAC block. So here, the most important component apart from the regular concrete block is the fly ash. So what happens is this fly ash, it would definitely make the block lighter in weight. So your cementatious component is reduced, your even steel component is reduced. And even in as far as the thermal property is concerned, these fly ash creates air gaps or pores in the material. So whatever the heat is incident on this thing, it gets trapped in these. Okay,
Sorry for the inconvenience, sir.
no problems.
I request
Uh,
the yeah, so participants, please be on mute. Sorry, sir.
yeah. So basically, due to these air gaps or pores, the heat is trapped inside this in these pores and the cavities, and that's how lesser amount of heat is propagated inside the building. So as I said, even the light weights and the reduced requirement of steel and concrete also makes it a very lucrative material as far as the wall assembly is concerned. So if you see the thermal properties of the different types of materials or wall material, concrete is having the highest U value, so more amount of heat will pass through. And as I go below to the conventional materials, AAC block is having the least U value, so the least amount of heat will pass through this. Now moving ahead to this a sample example as to how the calculations of U value is done. So with respect to different layers of the assembly, we have to calculate the R value. This thermal conductivity values are mentioned in the ECBC 2017 code at the back. So those values can be referred for each material. It's almost about 3 to 4 pages. So quite extensive list, and you will be able to see all the different types of materials are there as well as far as the wall or the roof assemblies is concerned. So you can determine that and the total R value, and you just reverse or inverse of that, you can be able to calculate what is the U value. So these for each and every different types of materials, you can calculate the U value and you can see whether it meets the requirements of the codes or not, and you can pick and choose the different materials that are available in that particular zone. Moving to the roof assembly, there are again different options with respect to roof assembly as well. First a normal slab, or you have a slab with insulation, or you do brick pad coba, you don't do an insulation. You can also have a terrace garden, or maybe you do a slab with a brick pad coba, and on top of it you go with a high reflective paint. So these are the different options that will help you to reduce the heat gain as compared to a normal slab roof. Now, if I have to do an insulation, where would I do? Whether I would do it over deck or under deck? The same question lies for the wall assembly also. So if I have to do an insulation, or if I want to do it, where would I do it? I would do it at an internal surface, or I would do it at an external surface. So ideally speaking, it should be done for a wall assembly. It should be done at an exterior surface. So you restrict the heat from the source itself. You don't let your structure get heat up first, and then you try to treat it. Likewise for roof assembly also, if I have to do an insulation, I will do it over deck rather than under deck. Under deck is of course simple, but once your slab is heated up, it will propagate through walls and the floor slabs into the building. Of course, the amount of heat ingress would be definitely lesser as compared to a roof without insulation, but ideally it should be done over deck to restrict the heat at the source itself. So different options of insulation: glass wool, thermocol, extruded polystyrene. So if I do this insulation with 75 so these would be the typical U values that you can see in this particular options. So definitely the XPS is a better option, which would give you the lowest U value and the least amount of heat will come through the building. Coming to a terrace garden, would say that why terrace garden is so efficient, or is one of the strategies to consider to reduce the heat gain inside the building. So for you can see from this particular image, this is down below is the exact image of a particular building or a roof. This also building is in Mumbai itself, and this is a thermographic image of this particular location. So wherever you see this tandoor tiles or the concrete tiles, the areas are hot red and the other areas are greenish in color. So if I consider the temperature difference in these, the temperature at the tandoor tiles would be about 50, and the temperature at the landscape area is 40 degrees. So there is a clear 10-degree difference in these areas. So just imagine if I have a flat slab roof without any landscape, the temperature at the roof would be 50 degrees. Now you can definitely would ask me that in no parts of India the temperature or the ambient temperature is 50 degree. So whatever your images are being shown is not true or correct. But the images or the temperatures that we have measured are at this particular point and not at the ambient. So over a period of time, when the heat is concentrated on this, it gets heated up, and the temperatures of that particular material definitely rises up. To give this an example, if I'll just give a small analogy. In peak summers, when you drive your car and when you have to go at a particular destination, what would you do? You would try to find a shade somewhere, maybe tree shade or some other shade, so that your car is not heated up. Unfortunately, you don't get any shade and you have to park your car outside. So by the time your work is done in an hour or two and you come back, you probably will feel the heat inside the car, which would be much more as compared to the ambient. The reason it is because the car is a metallic, and it would easily conduct the heat, and the air which is there inside the car, there is no area or no options for it to propagate out, because all your windows and everything is closed. So the first thing that you do is, when you enter into the car, you open the windows, let the heat go through, ventilation come through, and then you start your car, and that's how you drive. So the basic point over here is, over a period of time, the area which is the heat which is incident on a particular area, the temperature is much more as compared to the ambient. So definitely your top surface or a top floor, even your MEP consultant will treat it differently, and a more amount of air conditioning will be required if there is no insulation, or if there is no terrace garden over it. So definitely these two should be a part of your design. Now, coming to the end of the topic, I guess it's slightly before time that I've closed it out. This is a snapshot or a comparison of the U values of different materials. So the conventional material, red clay bricks, roof without insulation, and the glazing, which is single glaze. So you have these U values, and if I compare with efficient materials, the U values are much lower, and you would see that at least 20 to 30% of the heat ingress or the heat gain is reduced due to these energy efficient materials per se only. The different strategies, if you use, that will only add on to the percentage savings for this particular envelope design. So that's it from me. I'll be ready to take questions.
Uh, so all the participants can now, if you have any questions, you can please ask. We are open for question answers round. So,
Hello, sir. Is my voice audible?
Yes, yes, very much.
Sir, I wanted to ask regarding the heat island effect that you talked about at the end.
Yes.
Um, the vegetated areas have lesser ambient heat. I assume that is because of the constant water evaporation.
Not necessarily the constant water evaporation, but due to the soil and the green plants that are there, because plants will be, as you know, that they absorb most of the heat, and also you have a good layer of soil. Secondly, of course, whatever you said, that we do water the area, so that also reduce the heat gain. So it's not only due to water evaporation, but also due to the if you have unvegetated roof area, it is a metal will absorb more heat. I mean, material which is there is concrete and steel, which will absorb more heat as compared to the vegetated area.
Okay, but what I was confused about is, do the plants actually absorb heat and change it to maybe other forms of energy?
Uh, they do it, of course, but they
Or
require,
is
of
it
course,
that
sunlight.
the
No, it's basically a part of both. I mean, you have a soil, you have water, and you have plants which do absorb heat. Plants require sun for making their own food, so that's definitely a part of it. But most of the times you don't have very high trees or shrubs. If I would say, on the roof, because due to the practical limitations, the roots cannot go down inside. So most of the times it is a pure lawn which is there. So I would not say that the heat is absorbed by the plants, but yeah, as I said, that it's a green cover, wherein like any other green cover in the garden. Also, if you go, you will feel lesser heat is there as compared to the benches which are there at the in the garden. So it's basically the same analogy if you can compare over. It's the earth or the soil which is there which absorbs most of the heat.
Okay, thank you.
So many people have asked about the software in the chat window, where I think Pradnya wants to know that from which software we can get the thermal images, especially of the plants being
Uh,
shown simulated.
So the thermal images, you don't need any software. There is a thermal camera which is available. The thermographic camera it is called. So if you just go to the Amazon and you type in thermal cameras, you will get different options available. And that thermographic camera will give you these images. It will also help you to detect whether there are any leakages or whether there are any other problems. So basically, the temperature difference it can show you between the surfaces, between the cracks, etc. So there is no need of a software for this thermographic image that I have shown. It's from the camera itself.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes. Go on.
Sir, Architect Manish Patil here. I just wanted to inquire if any simulations were done for double roofing, in the sense that having a double roof which has renewable energy sources like solar panels
Mhm.
would create shading onto the primary roof, and
Yes.
it would lead to some sort of a cooling down effect or reduce the heat gain coefficient. So what are your
Definitely.
thoughts about double roofing in terms of building envelopes?
Definitely, it would for sure reduce the heat gain. It would act as a shading device over the roof, and which would help to reduce the direct heat gain. So, if you are not going with the insulations, or if you are not having even this green roof, and if you are having solar panels totally covered up, you can definitely go with that strategy also. Uh, as of now, on date, I cannot have any, I don't recollect any results due to that shading. But we can definitely simulate the amount or the extent of the shade, whether it is what type of material is also there, at what height it is there. So we can definitely model those in the software and can give you the exact values as well. The impact of this shading of the solar panels will not be as great as an insulated roof, but it would be definitely better as compared to your brick pack COBA.
Yes, sir. And sir, uh, which would be the software that would determine how much heat is radiated through the roof? Is there
Uh,
any?
there is no particular software which will tell you how much is radiated from the roof. Basically, there are softwares which can help you determine what is the amount of heat gain due to the roof. How much amount of heat I'm able to take inside my space, that we can determine through software, but not the radiation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Architect Garg, he wanted to ask some questions. He's
Yeah,
quoted
sure.
his question. Mr. Rajiv Garg, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, very much here.
Please continue.
Ma'am, I am a bit confused. Actually, I had come across many versions of ECBC. I remember earlier there was a prerequisite that buildings with connected load of 200 kilowatt shall be in this purview. Today we have learned that 100 kilowatt figure. So is it the same for all building, or it is varying for different building typologies?
Sir, I would like to answer your question. In 2017 version, earlier it was 500 kilowatt. After that, in 2017 version, they have reduced it to 100 kilowatt, so that the code is able to cover more number of buildings, more number of commercial buildings. So it is 100. It is always 100 kilowatt for commercial buildings in 2017 version. Earlier, it was 500 kilowatt, which has been cancelled now.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Architect Prathamesh Joshi, are you able to unmute yourself?
Actually, I have a simple question regarding the facade treatments. As sir has already discussed about the vertical surfaces like walls and facades, and as well as the slabs, I would like to know that the inclined facades, like the which are angular to the horizontal surfaces, can it be reduced the heat gain by significant value?
Yes, definitely. It can reduce the heat gain by significant value, I would say. But of course, it would depend on which orientation or which facade you are treating it, as well as the climatic conditions of that particular location. To put you or give you numbers, the shading devices can reduce the overall energy consumption by almost uh, 2% to as high as about 5% also. So it would depend as to what is the glass area, what shading you are doing it, and at which location you are doing it. To give those exact numbers, of course, as every project is unique, you will have to do it for a particular project only. I mean, you cannot just generalize it. But the range that I gave you is about anywhere. If you get at about 2%, it's good enough. I mean, you have done a good facade treatment, I would say.
Okay, sir. Thank you.